side and it was bent in curves, like a ladybug's legs are bent in, kind of like how a diamond would be if it was that small. Ended up on the ground on either side because the tip of his tires were turned inside the directions as if it was a diamond, and that would be one chess piece, and the other chess pieces could be like beans. Being in Illinois could go onto a bridge, and that could be a pond. You can have the beans as pawns. And like what a normal person thinks, I know you're gonna have your serial killers where something off center. With a clone, that's a whole new ball game where their subconscious isn't quite like a normal thing. Almost like if you have an ant and you're playing with ants and they'll crawl up your sleeve, but then they would want to crawl out of your sleeve because they know that they'll get crushed. When you have like a fly or a gnat, they'll crawl in your sleeve and they'll want to go deeper into your instead of flying out, because they want to if a clone, if it could subconsciously be more like a fly, and then you're gonna have these, like, instead of Siamese twins, it'll be like a Siamese clone growing out. The clone, you're gonna have to cut it off and help it grow. And I'm just not ready to have that argument because it fails every time. There's no reason for having that. Yeah, all life is beautiful, but there are designer problems and marketing issues. If you walk into a pet shop and you pick out 10 of the cutest animals you've ever seen, those animals were not born because you like to go into the shop and spend money on them. As much as the marketing for that to happen occurred, it is not the reason that their life is a existence. This is kind of off-centered because dogs were domesticated from wolves, which is a vector of what a clone would be. A clone, they would argue, is a life. It is not going to be alive unless someone makes the decision, mainly a doctor, in order to make it be of an occurrence. And you just simply can't argue the fact that that's the reason why anyone's alive, is because their parents came together and made that decision. It's completely different and has nothing to do with designers or marketers. And the whole idea of the USA where like you spit at royalty is just because, like, if you have a disadvantage, the underdog story for redemption. If you introduce all these clones, it's muddying the water of the melting pot. Someone's injured or having a hard time, like, you don't want to watch over them. Their like cross that they carry, that's what it's all about. But if you're introducing all these clones, then it's not, we're all here for a reason. That gets tampered with, where these clones weren't supposed to be here in the first place, but now they are, and they're on equal footing with people who are supposed to be here for a reason. It just muddies the water, and then it's eventually going to poison the water hole. And one thing that a clone would do that you couldn't be able to do, to alter, and allocate and bifurcate. And this is why it's so important, why I don't want AI to be a part of society when no one knows how to handle it. Because self-checking is what AI can do. And if it measures everyone as electrochemical, no different than a vending machine. Well, now you can have the people who run the AI, the corporate overlords, running these tests and having you be a part of it. And the moment you call them out on it, they would take a stance of, how dare you say the clone has no rights and this clone is a human, just like you and I. It has a heart beating. Where the corporations, when you call them out and say you're censoring people, you have these AI algorithms that flag, then they hide behind their ethics board, and you get a human resources person to record your complaints where they write it one-sided and throw it in the garbage can. I can totally see that dichotomy occurring where every LGBT hardcore member, if you ask them, would you like a clone? Each of them would want a clone that looked just like them so that they could have like a self-check on themselves. They would want it to look like them so they can make adaptations their clone to make sure if they're having any bad repercussions in the and for that person, if they're not producing fruit, like only good trees can bear good fruit, and then bad trees will produce bad, and any tree can get pruned. If you don't prune your tree, it's gonna go bad. So the proof in the pudding standpoint, where you can tell if something's artificial, but the name of the game is what the easy stuff, like not sifting your flour, is getting harder and harder to tell things that are artificial and are real. And with the whole LGBTQ movement, I'm scared that it's actually a gaslight in order to introduce cloning on an industrial scale, where they're already taking hormones to artificially terraform the endocrine system. This is what handles your hormone glands. It's like this whole system, right? And they're like manipulating it. And so what more technology is going to have more and more artificial cloning, which will allow you to like pretty much swap out the whole thing and put in what you'd like. And you can do this, is never going to be seamless, meaning if you make a tear, you're going to have rips on both ends. One thing a clone would do when it would be running is it would have a stem cell put into its ear so it could have a signal where it could hear someone saying the exact words for it, like in the debate when Joe Biden had the earplug in his ear and he was able to just repeat whatever the person was saying through the microphone, and he was picking that feed up. That's why he didn't want ears to be checked before entering the debate. He would not be checked. When asked, he said, no, you cannot check my ears for microphone. And here's my issue, is that the LGBTQ community wanted to fly their flags on every corner, and we're getting them heat because we don't think that that's necessary. Well, now they're holding a grudge and regret, and they have some reason to revolt and take to the extremes, because that's what they're best known for, because they get off doing that. And when clones come, it's not going to be from God. These clones are going to be from doctors. This will allow more swapping of different parts of systems. Well, the clones would be more acclimated to stem cells being plugged in with whatever they'd like. You want a kangaroo pouch? You're sick of your pockets? Well, here, swap in this stem cell. It's going to give you a kangaroo pouch on your belly, and you can put your stuff in there and not have to have a fanny pack. These LGBT community is going to be siding with clones because of their grudge of not allowing their flag to be everywhere. And this is super dangerous because they're going to promote the reason for having clones have every right and reason. And then the more they do it, the more that they'll want them to have more and more equality, where they'll want to prescribe more and more identity to a clone, almost as it's their pet rock. But the moment that you say that, a hate crime. If you're found saying that to an LGBT inside of their community, which would probably be like flooded with clones, because that's what they'd associate best with, and then they would push the extreme again to get the clone to run. Who the hell is this guy saying he doesn't want a clone being a president? How dare he? Well, more power to you. I, on the other hand, like stuff that is natural, so I'm trying to range gauges and understand the most natural thing possible, because I think God left little like purposes for existence. You don't need all the bells and whistles to do everything that all the bells and whistles together are marketed as. And it comes down to marketing, it does. That's why Jesus flipped all the marketers' tables outside of the church, because he had achieved the most natural way of doing the miraculous, like defeating death and walking on water, you know, stuff that you would see like a robot doing, but he wasn't a robot, so he was doing it, defacing any swapping of clone activity. You know, like a clone, if you wanted to, could swap out the epidermis of the bottom of its feet to have the epidermis of like water skippers that are able to skip on top of water. You might say that's crazy, but the clone would be saying, well, you're crazy for not being able to walk on water. You know, whatever floats your boat, and if it's not your cup of tea, well, you're gonna be the odd man out, the ugly duckling. You have all these clones walking on water and making it rain until, if you can't walk on water, you're going to be living a life miserable. Is that scenario possible? Absolutely. Can AI type in an algorithm and bounce it off satellites to make clouds condense and rain and pour until it can't no more? Yeah, that's possible. So I'm just trying to factor out the most natural way to have tests in order to understand anything unnatural, in order to have safeguards and kill switches, in order for any phenomenon that is too extreme or extravagant to be voted on, instead of it just occurring without zero repercussions and having people get hit flat-footed and pay for it on their end through having to bite the bullet. And what they're pushed for in their lobby is, you know, we won the first black president. I voted for him just to have one. And we were going to want the first woman president, or the LGBT community, the first gay president, and then the first cloned president. How do you feel about that? Having the president of the United States, if it were a clone. And that clone, what if it was all for AI, everywhere on everything? Well-made stuff is like first battered down hard and then filamented out properly, versus a thing that's rushed. It would be a lot like more mushy. And perhaps that's the reason why we like texture in food, is that you can tell the part where it's been battered first, well, like a sifter sifts the flour, and then it's made into a cake, and that cake tastes good, as opposed to just flour out of the bag and put into a cake. That cake would taste a bit worse.